Hello my friends, my name is David. Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to continue my series of counting down my top 25 board games. This is one that I started last week, counting down my first 5, so 25 through 21. And I wanted to keep that rolling for you. So this is my way of talking about one of my other big hobbies, which is board games. I've been playing board games for close to a decade now, in terms of modern board games. I, of course, grew up playing some of the classic ones that you would think of immediately when you hear the word board games if you're not immersed in the hobby. Now, these games are not necessarily the ideal starting points. I'll have a video where I'm going to give 5 good recommendations at some point in time in the next couple weeks for somebody who is first trying out some of these more modern board games. So, with no more beating around the bush here, let's just get right on into it. Number 20 on my list is a game I don't own yet, and the only reason I don't own it is because I'm not convinced that my wife would ever play it with me, and my friend that I would play it with already has a copy, who I'm borrowing this from. But I'm convinced that my wife will enjoy this if she plays it. I'm going to try to accomplish that still before I give this back to my friend. And that game is called Watergate. So this is by Matthias Kramer. It is published by Capstone Games, and this is a 2-player game, about 30 to 45 minutes. And it is what's known as a card-driven game. So each round you'll get a hand of cards, and they'll have a numerical value on there, which you can use to do certain generic actions, or you can use it for the event that is on the card, and that event usually is pretty powerful. And some of these events benefit you, some of them will benefit your opponent, and so the crux of it is figuring out how to manage that hand to maximize your opportunities. And the neat thing about this is it's got a little kind of like a cork board, so to speak, with string throughout there, and you're trying to, both sides are trying to jockey for positioning on this board. So there's the journalist side who is trying to make connections from the center here out to at least 2 of the people along the outskirts of the board, and this is to get enough evidence to convict Nixon of wrongdoing. And the other player is Nixon. He's trying to prevent that from happening and putting tiles on their blank side to cut off the paths going through. And so it's a nice little push-pull. It's got a lot of tug-of-war to it. I love the idea of managing the hand and trying to get the tiles, and the tiles that'll come up, there's a couple that'll come up each round, and you won't know ahead of time which ones they are, especially as the journalist. You won't even have any idea what they are until you play a card to potentially move one of that particular color. But the Nixon player gets to see them and put them all kind of face down, so you don't know at the start what's available. So there's 3 different colors: yellow, blue, and green. Some of them that are dual color in there, and so you're trying to guess at what you can get. And so there's a track, and if you have it on your side of the track at the end of the round, you get the tile and get to place it. If it's on the other side of the track, then the Nixon player will get to place it on the face down side. And then any that stays in the center just gets tossed out of the game. And there's also influence that you can do, and to instant win by having enough influence if you're Nixon. So yeah, it's a fun game. It's a fast-playing game. Lots of really tough, meaningful decisions in it, packed into this little box. So I cannot recommend Watergate enough. This is one that could conceivably be played by somebody newer to games. It might be a rough go for the first play or two, but it's definitely short enough, and the rules are simple enough that you could probably push through it. Although it probably wouldn't be the best first one to start with. It would be one that would be one of the early ones that you could play, assuming that you have one person that you could dedicatedly play games with. Next, I'm going to talk about another 2-player game. I like a lot of 2-player games. I play a lot of games with my wife. This is one I do not play with my wife because I don't think she would ever play it, no matter how good it is, because it is a historical game. She has very little interest in more historical games. And this one came as a big surprise to me. So historically, you've probably already noticed from my channel that I like medieval and earlier for my time period, but my friend has this game and I'm again borrowing it for the purpose of filming it. And this one's on the American Revolutionary War, which is ahead of my preferred period of time. And this one's really interesting. It's very unique. So this is called Supply Lines of the American Revolution, the Northern Theater, 1775 through 1777. And then there's a whole long extra bit there. So being a game of war or logistics and deception, and suitable and commendable pastime for gentlemen and ladies both, invented by Mr. Tom Russell, a patriot born in these United States, with cartographical embellishment by Ania B. Zielkowska. So this is by Hollandspiele, which is one of my favorite small publishers of historical games. They also have a few other non-historical games, but they are a fantastic company. I absolutely love Supply Lines of the American Revolution. I did not expect to like it. So one side's going to play as the British, the other side as the rebellious Americans. And it's a matter of you've got a timeline and you're jockeying for position over the map, trying to build what, as the name might suggest, supply lines. You need to have the ability to trace a route for your supplies from one place to another in order to be able to actually do things. And that's the puzzle that makes this a really interesting one. So it's not so much you get your dudes together on the same spot on the map and you roll some dice and fight. You also have to have food to feed people. You have to have ammunition to be able to wage war in battles. You need to have these things in order to move, in order to fight. And so it becomes a big puzzle of, okay, this is what I want to do. Now, what steps do I need to do in order to be able to accomplish that so that I have the supplies I need in order to not only do this campaign and go to where I need, but also to maintain it. The two sides are a little different. I've played only as the British so far and have enjoyed it. I've played it twice and won once and lost, won once and lost the other one. And it was the surprise hit game for me. And at some point in time, my friend and I are also going to play its sequel, which is Supply Lines of the American Revolution, the Southern Strategy. So these are undoubtedly both games that are going to remain in my top 25. I absolutely love it. Again, both by Hollandspiele. Outstanding designs and a very different sort of game. It won't be the last historical game that you will see on my list, but that one is definitely the one that concerns itself most with dealing with getting supplies to your army in order to maintain those things. And that gives it kind of a historical flavor that you don't usually think about when you're reading about these wars, these battles. You're not thinking about the trains of supplies and being able to not only establish but maintain those uninterrupted in order to keep that army going and marching and traveling through into enemy territory and all of those other aspects of it. Now, the next game on my list, this is a big box. Ugh. Because I have almost everything for this game, and so one of the expansions called Conclave came with this ginormous box. This is Mystic Vale. This is what is known as a deck building game. And so in a deck builder, typically everybody starts with the same exact cards in their deck. And over the course of the game, players are buying new cards to add to their deck in order to make it stronger, more efficient, to do better things, to give them powers in order to ultimately achieve victory, usually through gaining a certain number of points. This game takes it to a different level. And so what it does, it says here in the corner, card crafting system. So these have cards that are in invisible sleeves. And let me actually get this out, because this is one that needs a demonstration. So bear with me. So you have a card that is going to have, it's sleeved, it has to be sleeved. And so it'll have something pre-printed on there. Most of them, about half of your deck are going to be these cursed lands, which have this red tree, which is bad. and then the blue dot, which generates you resources that you can use to purchase new cards. And so the more of these that you get out, the more you're able to get. And so each turn you're going to have your deck that you're flipping cards off of until you reveal your third red tree, and that means you have to stop. So the more red trees you add in there, the more likely you are to stop. And if you ever, once you get to 3, if you're at exactly 3, you have the choice then, when it's your turn, of doing what's called pushing and flipping taking that card that you revealed that has that third tree off the top, flipping over the next one, and if it's another red tree, then you bust. All of your cards that you had flipped out go away, so you have a push your luck element. But the brilliance of this game is that you're buying things that'll actually fit on this card. Here we go. So you're buying cards that are clear plastic, usually with one thing in there. And as you buy them, you add them to a card that you had out in play. And now all of a sudden that one card has a second one in there. Let's see if I can find one that has a third spot. And so as you're going through, you're not making your deck bigger, but you're taking those same 20 cards and you're adding more stuff in there so that every time it comes out, it's going to trigger more and more stuff for the card. So you're making what you already have in there more efficient rather than, making it a thicker deck, and so it becomes bogged down with more stuff that you have to go through to get to recycle the deck. And that's the brilliance of this game, is that you are crafting new cards into your deck every time you play it. In the market, there's going to be 9 different cards, so there's 3 different tiers. Tier 1, which are cheaper cards, they're typically weaker, and they're the ones that you're buying first. Tier 2 cards, and then Tier 3 cards, which are going to be your more expensive cards. And so that's what I absolutely love about this game. Because it's different each and every time, because the market's going to be different every time. The way you can build your deck, you can get synergies to where certain things on here will trigger off of each other. So there might be a card that gives you an extra buying power for every one of a certain symbol that's on other things on this card, and so you can make it so it really works out. There are green trees that you can get that'll offset a red tree that you have out to make it so that your deck is able to get more cards out more consistently so that you're able to do more things. And I absolutely love Mystic Vale. This is one that I could definitely say, base game itself, which is a lot less overwhelming than that ginormous box that you saw, I could recommend strongly to anybody who is interested in board games. It's deck building is a pretty common mechanism. Another great deck building game for newer players would be called Clank, where you are going and exploring and stealing treasures. I don't have that one because my wife was not a big fan of that one, but I've got friends that have it, and I'm always willing to play a game of Clank. She's not a big fan of this one either, but it's one of my absolute favorite games and has always been one of my favorite games ever since my first play. So we've got 2 more to get through. So we've got number 17, I believe this is. And this one is The Ruhr, A Story of Coal Trade by Thomas Spitzer. So this is the second of 3 games about the coal trade and the history of coal. This is a republished by Capstone Games. You heard them before with Watergate. And sadly, Capstone only republished the first and second games. They did not publish the third game in the trilogy due to some disagreements with the designer, I believe it was. So my collection is incomplete. I don't have the third one, which I could still get the old version, but I like him to be, reflective of the same set that I have here. And in this one, you have a big, long, narrow map where you've got a river on there. And so you're moving your boat down the river to pick up coal and then to deliver it to cities along the way in order to generate income. There's a player board where as you're making these deliveries, depending on where you deliver it to, you get to unlock certain abilities and technologies that you're able to do things more efficiently, to get to the further back on the board, to be able to go further, to be able to increase the value of dice. Because this is a game that has a lot of dice, but none of them are ever rolled. The dice are the value that your coal is worth, and then there's little things called gates along the river, and so every one of those that you pass through diminishes the value of your coal by 1, so it can, if you're not all actively taking off these gates, you could pick up that 5 value coal, but by the time you get to your destination, it might be only worth $1 or $2, and one of those dollars is going to go to unlocking another tier towards your advancement on the technology tracks. And it's a really, really thinky, interesting game. It's got the standard game, which is on this German map with the Ruhr. It's got an alternative side, which has the Ohio River, which I have not played on the alternative map, but I haven't needed to yet because this one is just fantastic. It's a delight every time it comes out because it just gives you so many interesting decisions of where do you start, what are you trying to pick up, where are you trying to deliver to, what order are you trying to do these to get to the technologies so that you can get to the higher value coal first and to be able to unlock certain things that will help you be more efficient and more effective throughout the game. And each round there's also an event that's going to happen that's going to impact the way things are done. So this is definitely a longer, a more thinky title, but a lot of fun for those of you that are already enjoying board games. And if you like a heavy Euro with a lot of thinking and a lot of unlocking powers and trying to essentially beat everybody to the most valuable things first, this is a great one. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Mambasa by Alexander Pfister, which Alexander Pfister designed Great Western Trail, which I talked about last week, and this will not be the last time you hear his name in my countdown. This is probably my absolute favorite designer for Euro games. I love his work. Mambasa is no exception to that. So in this one, there are 4 different companies, and along the outside there's kind of a little stock track for each of them, and so you're attempting to get cards that will let you trigger certain things. A lot of times they'll have you move up on one of the 4 company tracks, and the higher up you advance on those company tracks, the more points you will get at the end of the game based on your positioning. And the further up you go, it'll unlock new special powers for you. There's a market of cards that will be constantly changing to where you can buy the cards into your deck. And the real brilliance of this is that you are going to be selecting your cards at the start of the round that you're going to activate. And at the end of that round, they go up into a discard up at the top, matching that respective pile. And so at the end of the round, you get to take one of those 3 piles back to your hand. So this card that you use right now, which might be, 2 bananas in value, and it might be 3-4 turns before you take that discard pile back to your hand so that you can have access to that card again. And so trying to manage what you need to play for that turn, what position on that pile that you want to place them so that they go into the discard pile that you know that you need so that you can get them back when you need them to do the future actions along with whatever else happens to be in that discarded pile. It's a brilliant mechanism. It's one that is not done nearly enough, but it's what makes this game. Just will melt your brain trying to figure out the best way to manage all of these things, to do the actions you need when you need them, and to be able to set yourself up to do them again in 2 turns, let's say, when you need to do them again. This is one of his best designs. It is not his best design because I said he's going to appear again on this list, but this is absolutely fantastic. I love Mombasa. Talking about it makes me want to just go and set it up and play it again tonight if I could. So I can't recommend Mombasa nearly enough, or any of Alexander Pfister's games. I have not run into a design of his that I dislike. My wife certainly has, but I am yet to be disappointed by any of his games, his designs. And just like last week, I'm going to give you a bonus selection. This one I actually do have a copy of. This is one that just narrowly missed making my top 25, and that is called Targi. So this is a little two-player game produced by Cosmos. It was designed by Andreas Steger. And this is what has what is called a worker placement element to it. So there's this grid of cards, and you're placing your workers along the outside grid, and where that you place them will let you have that action. Now, the nuance here, so each of you have 3 workers that you get to place each round. And you can only place them along the outside. You can't place them on the corners. The corners are off limits. And so once I place a worker, let's say right here in that example, now my opponent cannot place on the card across from mine. I can place across from there, but then the other player can't do that. So that shrinks the number of options that they're able to go to. And so once both of you have placed all 3 of your workers out, there are the cross intersections. So the cards in the center here, the 9 that will be changing throughout the entire game, where there's an intersection. So you've got the blue one here and the blue one right there. So it puts a little disc on there. So you also get to do that action. So you'll end up activating up to 5 cards. So if you place directly across from yourself, you're shrinking the number of cards that you're able to activate. And there are 2 types of cards, ones that give you resources, and then there are cards that will give you, that you need to pay resources for, that will score you points at the end of the game. Some of them will give you abilities. This is a wonderful, delightful game. A lot of really good, interesting decisions. I can't recommend Targi highly enough. You can play it in roughly an hour with 2 players. So this is definitely one to check out. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed. And yeah, stay tuned. Tomorrow, Poetry Thursday. I'm excited to read some poetry to you. So come back tomorrow.